What's going on, everybody? Heistames here. Thank you for tuning in to this very special video. As you guys know, I am a pre-workout and fitness supplement reviewer. As you guys can see by the entire massive section of pre-workouts behind me, that's only a part of the pre-workouts I have here. I have my whole other section here. I got my pump formulas over there, and the proteins and the vitamins and all the other miscellaneous stuff are in the kitchen and dining room area, but that is neither here nor there. If you guys are new to this channel, you happen to come across this video because you're fans of Cobra Kai, Karate Kid, and you guys are into fitness, you're into lifting weights, into supplementation, definitely check out the videos I have on here. I have about 250 videos, or at least close to it, reviewing the hottest products from the past couple of years, and I keep up to date with all the latest drops and all that other stuff. So if you guys are into pre-workouts, fat burners, proteins, and any other fitness supplements, definitely check out the channel. If you find it to be intriguing or interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because I'm dropping content regularly. Okay, so with that being said, today I'm doing something that I've never done here on the channel before. I'm going to be reviewing a series, and this actually is my favorite series, probably my favorite TV series of all time. And granted, in this day and age, I don't really watch all that much TV series anymore. My time is super limited, and I'm hitting the gym, I'm doing the YouTube channel, I'm doing a whole bunch of other stuff on the side, I'm grinding, I'm hustling regularly, and I don't really have time to keep up with the latest shows. I'm a big anime fan as well. I haven't kept up probably in the last 5 or 6 years with any of the new series except the occasional one or two that really pique my interest, but it's what it is, guys. You become an adult, you grow up, you have things you got to take care of, and you just don't have time to do the things you love to do. But when it comes to Cobra Kai, I always made an exception. I always found the time to watch it. Granted, the series did end a couple of days ago. They released part 3 of season 6, and today is Sunday. You guys are watching this on Monday. So I'm a couple of days late. And again, it goes back to me being short on time, being limited with what I can do. But I figured this is something I want to do. If anything, just for myself, I want to come on here, talk about my favorite series and what it means to me on a personal level, because Cobra Kai isn't just a work of fiction. It's a phenomenal work of fiction, but there is a lot of life lessons you can extrapolate from that series and apply it to your personal life, at least for me. I'm a former heavy pot smoker, somebody that was unmotivated in my late teens and early to mid 20s, and I pretty much wasted those years and just went to work, came home, smoked, and did nothing else with my life. And it's interesting to me that with Cobra Kai, the main character, Johnny Lawrence, he was essentially the villain in the original Karate Kid movies, well, in the first movie anyway, and he had a redemption arc throughout this entire series, and it wasn't just a straightforward path to redemption. He had a lot of struggles, a lot of failures along the way, and it really mirrors my life because even to this day, I still struggle with a lot of issues, and I've never gotten to the point where I got comfortable and I'm on cruise control. No matter what, guys, in life, you will always have challenges that you need to overcome. Things seem like they're going okay for a couple of weeks, couple of months, even a couple of years, and then you get hit with the freaking left punch to the face, and you got to figure things out all over again. And that's the beautiful thing about Cobra Kai, the fact that it's a super relatable show, especially for somebody like me that's dealing with stuff constantly. We're all dealing with stuff, but that's neither here nor there. So this review is going to be all over the place because I've never done a review. I don't have any notes. My desk is clear. I have no notes. I'm literally just going off the top of my head. But I want to tell you what those original Karate Kid movies mean to me, and then the series as well. And we're going to start with the first Karate Kid movie that came out in 1984. You guys know the story. I'm sure you've all seen the movie. Growing up, it used to air on TV regularly. I used to get it from Blockbuster regularly, used to rent the movie. I always liked part 2 as well. Part 3 was always a little bit iffy for me. I did love Terry Silver's character in part 3. He was actually one of my favorite characters, as over the top as he was. But the first movie was always the most grounded to me, the most based in reality. And although it was obviously a work of fiction and over the top, it's something that I always came back to and always enjoyed. I would rewatch the first movie every couple of years. Now, when I first heard about Cobra Kai and I saw the trailer back on YouTube for season 1, I had mixed feelings about it. I was a big fan of the Karate Kid movies, especially the first one, and I didn't know if they were going to do justice to this series. So I was assuming that this series is going to be a continuation of the first movie and ignore parts 2 and 3. Boy, was I wrong, and boy, am I glad I was wrong, because the way they pulled these legacy characters together and wove them into the story was brilliant. To me, that is probably the greatest part of Cobra Kai, the fact that they gave you a little bit each time, and they just kept building and building and building until you essentially built up such a phenomenal foundation, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. So the first season to me was, and I would say still is, my favorite because I went in with very, very low expectations. The concept intrigued me because in the first movie, Johnny Lawrence was the villain. And although you can look at it as with shades of gray and, maybe he was provoked, whatever, more or less, if you watch the first movie on its own without ever seeing Cobra Kai, Johnny is clearly the villain and Daniel is the protagonist. He's the one that gets bullied. He's the one that has to overcome the Cobra Kais. And you sympathize with Daniel the entire series. Whether he was a little bit of a prick, that is debatable. But Johnny was clearly the villain, the antagonist in the first movie. Now, in Cobra Kai, it literally flipped the entire script. And we're going to talk about that, flipping the script, because that is something that gets brought up in the series in season 1. And it's actually a lesson that I apply to my personal life. And again, this series, the beautiful thing about Cobra Kai is that I took a lot of these lessons from this fictitious, over-the-top, and sometimes cheesy series, and I was able to apply it to my personal life to become a better person. So to me, this is a series that means a lot. There are plenty of incredible, masterful series out there. You got Breaking Bad, you got, for all its flaws, you got Dexter, which is one of my favorite series, you got Sons of Anarchy, you got The Following with Kevin Bacon. You have a lot of good series out there that came out over the years, but it's just a work of fiction and it starts and stops right there. But there aren't that many shows where I can actually extrapolate these life lessons and apply them to my personal life. So Cobra Kai to me is a very, very special series in that regard. Now, in season 1, you follow Johnny Lawrence. The guy's kind of had a pretty crappy life. Ever since he lost that fight to Daniel, everything went downhill, right? He essentially peaked in high school, and everything afterwards was downhill. And meanwhile, Daniel, the kid that he bullied, the kid that was the loser in high school, the point where Johnny has peaked, he's suddenly the successful car salesman. He's got a good-looking wife. He's got a family. He has a lot of money, clearly. So it was definitely an interesting twist on the series, and I liked it. It intrigued me right off the bat because it was something different, and it actually showed you footage and flashbacks from the original Karate Kid movie, but with a different, fresh perspective. And I always like when movies or series or animes, whatever form of entertainment you're consuming, when they do that. I've always been a fan of flashbacks, especially when they show it to you from a different perspective, because then it kind of makes you look at the source material differently. And that's something that I love about this series in general. All the seasons have a certain amount of flashbacks, but then they add to the actual lore of it, and it builds upon it, and you can actually go back and watch the movies now after watching the entire Cobra Kai series, and you can look at it from an entirely different lens. You're not just going to view it as its own movie. I just went and rewatched the Karate Kid movie recently after finishing season 6, and you look at it so differently, especially after learning all the history about Miyagi, all the lore that they added years later, 30 years later to be exact. It's pretty freaking crazy, but they did such a masterful job of respecting the original source material, adding to it without it becoming overbearing, right? Because it's very easy to create extra lore 25, 30 years later, but then it feels like it's over the top, it's too much. They found the perfect balance, no pun intended, but they found the perfect balance here to actually build upon this series, but it doesn't feel like it's too much. It feels like literally this could have been written back in the 80s when these movies came out, and as if it was planned the entire time. And that is just a testament to how good the writing for this series is. So we're following Johnny, and then you're following the other protagonist, Miguel, who was living in Johnny's building. He's essentially the new Karate Kid. He's essentially playing the role of Daniel LaRusso, and it's interesting. Everything comes back full circle in this series, which is something I really, really love about it, because Miguel ends up being Johnny's student, but then he also becomes Daniel's student in later seasons. I'm not going to go through the entire series, guys, because we're going to be here for hours and hours, and I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to break down every single season and plot points and whatnot. I'm just shooting off the hip right now. Like I said, no bullet points, no notes, nothing like that. But to me, watching Miguel's journey was incredible. And then you have Robbie, who is Johnny's son, right? And he's on his own journey. He's essentially, a troubled kid. He's hanging out with the wrong people. I think they insinuated to the fact that he was doing drugs at some point. I could be wrong about that, but they did insinuate that at some point. But he's, doing schemes and whatnot, trying to make money quickly. And he's at odds with his dad because his dad abandoned him, and rightfully so. I understand why the kid's pissed off, but you essentially hate Robbie for the first like 2, maybe 3 seasons. I didn't start warming up to him until about season 3. I genuinely disliked him. I thought he was a prick. And again, he is a victim, but this is just testament to how good the writing is, because you're rooting for Johnny, this guy that life dealt him such a bad hand and he hasn't recovered since losing to that crane kick. You feel for Johnny and you want him to succeed. You see that the guy is trying to get his life back on track. He reopens the Cobra Kai dojo, which was a huge moment for him, but he also didn't want it to be exactly the way that Kreese taught him how to do it, because Kreese was over the top and he went too far in his extreme philosophy of Cobra Kai. So Johnny took those core lessons that he learned as a kid, but he kind of twisted it a little bit and turned it more into his vision. And he starts off with the one student, Miguel. Then Aisha, which is another girl, comes in, and she was also being bullied during season 1. So they were the OG 2 students. And then later on, you're getting a couple more students. So I'm not going to go into the whole series of things, but needless to say, it was a very, very incredible first season. And I watched it back on YouTube before Netflix bought it. I think Netflix got the rights in season 3. Seasons 1 and 2 came out. Back then, it was called YouTube Red before they rebranded it to YouTube Premium. I was a YouTube Red OG Cobra Kai fan. I was watching it since the very beginning, and I freaking loved it. So, man, what an incredible series. But everything comes back full circle, and every season kind of ends with a cliffhanger, and then they're going to introduce a character. So, spoiler alert, Miguel wins the tournament in season 1, so Johnny, for the first time, feels accomplished, but also a little bit conflicted because his son, Robbie, who was being mentored by Daniel, lost. And Miguel kind of used a little bit of underhanded tactics to win that tournament. So Johnny's a little conflicted. On one side, he's happy because he's actually on top for the first time in his life as a sensei, but he also kind of won with a little bit of a negative connotation, right? Miguel didn't outright cheat, but he played a little bit dirty. So he wasn't really happy with that, especially because his son was the one that lost the fight. So going on to the later seasons, Robbie, which is Johnny's son, he got closer to Daniel, and Miguel got closer to Johnny, and that's how they continued the dynamic. And there's been a lot of flip-flopping throughout the seasons, you know, because the story dictated it. Sensei Kreese came back. That was the crazy cliffhanger in the end of season 1. I remember watching that, and it blew my mind. I'm like, holy crap, Kreese is back, and Cobra Kai is going to go in a whole different direction. And then I had to wait a freaking year until season 2 came out. That was some crazy stuff. But every season ends on a cliffhanger. Season 2, you had that crazy brawl in the school where Miguel lands on his back and essentially thought he was going to be paralyzed for life. Obviously, we knew he's not going to be paralyzed for life because the show is centered around him, but it was still very impactful, and I really hated Robbie at that point. I genuinely hated him at that point. And the following season, where he was sent to juvie and he started coming to his own as a character, was also very interesting. But every season kind of interjected a little bit of something. Season 4 was actually one of my favorite seasons because that's when they introduced Terry Silver. And going back to the Karate Kid movies, Karate Kid Part 3 was always considered to be the weakest of all the movies. Part 2 was good, not as good as 1, and 3 was always considered a little bit out there because Terry Silver's character was over the top and crazy. And if you watch that movie on its own without ever watching any Cobra Kai, you're just going to laugh at some of the performances. It's over the top, especially Terry Silver. He's just hopped up the entire time, kind of like how Heist the Mace is hopped up when I'm running these pre-workouts. But the very first thing they did in season 4 was address the over-the-top actions of Terry Silver in season 3. When Kreese goes to him and he tries to recruit him and get him to come back to Cobra Kai, Terry tells him, man, I was crazy during those days. I was so hopped up on cocaine that I didn't even know where I was half the time. I was terrorizing a high school kid, for God's sake. What are you on about? So right off the bat, the first conversation they have, Terry Silver literally addressed the big elephant in the room, which is the over-the-top performance in Karate Kid Part 3. And that really got me thinking. I'm like, man, these writers truly care about the source material because they are addressing the movies, which they don't have to do. This is a new series. They can kind of brush it off and just go with the series and ignore those, later movies, parts 2 and 3. But they addressed it right off the bat, and I said, you know what? These guys actually care about the lore. They care about the source material, and they actually care about creating a compelling narrative. So right off the bat, I really like that. And Terry Silver, to me, was always a fascinating character. Again, he was goofy and over the top in those movies, but I still enjoyed him a lot in Part 3. He was probably the best part of the movie. So I love what they did with his character. He was just, you could tell he was a menace deep down, but that crazy maniacal side of him was subdued over the years. He was on like a vegan diet and he was like kind of dating this chick, but he was almost like somebody was on antidepressants, you know, like when you see somebody who's hopped up on antidepressants, they're just down, they have a very flat affect, they're unemotional, they're tired, they're lethargic. That was kind of him. And Kreese came in there and he snapped him out of that trance and he essentially put the life back into Terry Silver, but it backfired on him. It backfired on him big time because Terry Silver ended up going crazy and essentially taking over the entire dojo and going so extreme with it that even Kreese was taken aback and he was essentially pushed out of the picture. So that was a very interesting experience for sure. During the seasons, Johnny also flip-flopped a couple of times. He was let go of the original Cobra Kai, but then he came back with Eagle Fang Karate, which I always thought was very gimmicky, but it was kind of funny, so I went with it. I actually think I had an Eagle Fang t-shirt that I got at Hot Topic once, but that was a couple of years ago. But he was doing that for a little while. He had his little group of loyal members, and then you had Daniel doing his own thing with Miyagi-Do, and they tried teaching together, being co-senseis, and they were still clashing. And I love that whole dynamic between him and Daniel because granted they're growing as characters and you could see that there are a lot of similarities between the two, but they never fully embraced each other as friends because they do have that history. And no matter what, it's always going to linger a bit in the background. So granted, they were making progress. At some points, they were maturing as characters and coming into their own. But at the same time, they were also kind of butting heads with each other, always getting a jab in here and there. So to me, that was one of the best dynamics with Sensei Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso, Mr. LaRusso, whatever you want to call him. They had a very interesting dynamic, and it's something that made for a very, very enjoyable watching experience. Now, as for the new generation, you had a lot of characters, but essentially you have the main characters. You got Miguel, you got Hawk, you got Dimitri, even though I did not like Dimitri in the beginning, but he kind of grew on me a little bit. You had Robbie. You had in the later seasons Daniel's son, Anthony LaRusso. You had Kenny coming in. That was a subplot that they developed in the later seasons. I think season 4, season 5, they started that whole Anthony LaRusso plot line and him and Kenny going back and forth. So that was interesting. You obviously have Sam and Tori who were going at it regularly, but then they kind of became friends. Frenemies, you can say, but then they actually did become friends later on. So I actually cared about the teenagers just as much as I cared about the legacy characters. And that's what makes the series so compelling to me. The fact that you have the OG cast, which they respected in this series. They didn't disrespect the OG cast like Star Wars, right? The new trilogy of Star Wars where they disrespected the Luke Skywalker character and Harrison Ford's character. I forgot his name, slipping my mind. You know, that was not the way to handle those characters. They essentially pushed out all the legacy characters so they can focus on the new characters. And that's not a way to do it. You got to find a way to do it in a respectful manner. I can also use those criticisms for the new Halloween trilogy. I'm a big Halloween diehard, and I didn't really like the way they handled some of the legacy characters, especially in Halloween Kills. I felt like they just brought them back for the sake of saying they brought them back, and then they just kind of disregarded them. They could have done so much more with some of these characters, but it is what it is. And Cobra Kai, they really utilized the legacy characters to build the next generation, but they didn't do it in the expense of the legacy characters. So the legacy characters still were respected and actually contributed to the main storyline, but you also have these new characters coming in to bring in the next generation. And who knows, maybe they're going to have spin-offs 2, 3, 4 years from now with the newer characters, and I'm going to be watching it. You best believe I'm going to be watching any spin-offs they release regarding Cobra Kai because they prove to me that they know what they're doing when it comes to writing. But let's talk about the last season because season 6 to me was absolutely incredible. I was actually kind of happy with how they ended season 5. I didn't know if they're even going to come back for a season 6 or not. For the record, I was content with how season 5 ended. Granted, there was still a couple of loose ends, but if they would have ended it on season 5, I would have been okay with it. They got the win, and Cobra Kai essentially was exposed for what they were under Terry Silver, and Miyagi-Do stood on top, so I was okay with it. But then they came back for season 6 with a Sekai Teikai tournament, which is the worldwide karate tournament, and they split it into 3 parts. Now, I didn't watch it as they came out. Again, been really busy. Life's been crazy lately, so I haven't been able to keep up. But as soon as part 3 dropped about a week and a half ago, I went back, I binged parts 1, parts 2, and parts 3 in 3 days. binged it together with my girlfriend, and we did it in 3 days, each day for each part. So 5 episodes per sitting. And I loved all of it. I love the fact that they went to Spain and they got the footage over there. I thought that was really well done. They definitely, Netflix gave them a higher budget for sure, because everything was well shot and presented nicely. The fight sequences were great, and it was just a very enjoyable watch. And I know some people didn't like parts 1 and 2. They said that they kind of went around in a roundabout way to get to where they had to go. I personally had no issues with it. I thought it was really interesting how Johnny finally somewhat embraced Miyagi-Do, and he said, we're going to enter the tournament under Miyagi-Do. And you did have Cobra Kai, which that was a whole interesting subplot where Kreese, because he escaped from prison, he went to, I think it was South Korea or wherever that was, and he met up with this girl who was now the sensei of what would become the new Cobra Kai. And the grandfather, the grandmaster, was still alive. That was freaking crazy. I did not expect that. But there was a whole bunch of history there from his Vietnam days, and they did incorporate a lot of those flashbacks, which they also did in the early seasons. I didn't talk about that. I loved all the flashbacks between Kreese and Terry Silver, and that whole Vietnam sequence in seasons 3 and 4 was incredible. And some people say it was a little bit over the top, fighting over the snake pits. Listen, this is a fictional series, and there's going to be a certain amount of cheesiness and over-the-top 80s nostalgia that goes into it. But for me, that is part of the charm. The 80s music, the over-the-top action sequences, the unbelievable aspect of it. To me, it's all a part of the series. And granted, season 1 was a little bit more grounded in reality, and it was a little bit more well-balanced, which I did like. Season 1 is still my favorite, but as crazy as things got, even in season 5 with the sword fights and everything, the ninjas, I was there for all of it. I loved every single one of those things. But in season 6, it was a little bit over the top for those first 2 parts, especially some of the fight sequences were crazy. Remember, guys, these kids are supposed to be under 18, okay? And they're fighting like people that have 35 years of experience in karate or whatever other martial arts they were performing. But I really enjoyed it. There was a lot of drama, a lot of twists and turns. And when the Cobra Kais did come from Korea to fight in the tournament, you had the big twist of Tori, who recently lost her mother, go over to the Cobra Kai team. And that was a big shock because she was still dating Robbie, and they had their issues, but they were still technically together. She went over to Cobra Kai, and it threw the whole team into a disarray. So a little bit of soap opera-ish drama there, but I'm all about it. I'm all about the drama. And as long as the episode ends and it's on a cliffhanger and I'm at the point where, holy crap, I got to go to the next episode, they did something right. They hooked you. And that's what every TV show needs. It needs a hook to get you emotionally invested. And that is the name of the game, being emotionally invested, actually caring about these fictional characters and really being invested on an emotional level. So it's something that I really care about. I think about these characters and it's almost like they're real people. So they did their job really well. But for me, season 6, part 3 was really the crescendo, the finale. Everything comes together full circle. You had Kreese go and take care of business when it came to Terry Silver. Terry was on that boat. He was going to hire an assassin to go and abduct Johnny's family so he would have leverage over him. But Kreese came in there and they both went out in a blaze of glory. No pun intended, but that was a freaking incredible sequence. And then you had the final fights. You had Tori beating that chick, Zara, that new girl that they introduced with the Dragons team, which was part of Terry Silver's new team. So Tori beat her in a convincing fashion in the end. So that was a very satisfying moment. And then Miguel beat the main antagonist, also from that Dragons team. I'm forgetting his name, but that was very, very interesting. So I really enjoyed that. But to me, the full circle moment that really meant more than anything else was when Kreese and Johnny had their moment. Before Kreese went out and did what he did on the boat, Kreese and Johnny had their moment where they finally opened up on an emotional level and spoke to each other in a real way, which is something that they kind of did a few times in the past, but it never got to that breaking point. And Johnny broke down and essentially told Kreese everything that he wanted to tell him for the past 35 years. And it was a very, very emotional moment. It got me a little teary-eyed. It was a super emotional moment, and it was a moment that felt earned and something that actually brought the whole series together. And you could tell that Kreese really wanted to get that redemption. And whether he got it or not, that is for, you and me, the viewers, to decide. I think it was really well done because he committed the ultimate sacrifice, but without Johnny even knowing about it. So it could be that Johnny didn't know anything and won't even know anything about what happened, but it kind of leaves you with a little bit of a sense that he will eventually figure it out, that Kreese committed that sacrifice on his behalf. Maybe he won't ever know, but either way, it was a really heartfelt moment. And to me, the best moment of the series was in the very end, the last episode, where Johnny had to fight the other sensei, who I'm forgetting his name, the guy with the little goatee from the Iron Dragons. He had to fight him, and the winner would essentially have their dojo win the Sekai Tekai. And Johnny, for the first time in his life, actually won the tournament. And it was interesting because you thought he was going to go for the crane kick. You thought it was going to mirror the original Karate Kid movie. He even got himself in that position. But then what did he do? He swept the leg like Kreese told him. So, man, it just came together so beautifully in the end. And Daniel hands him the trophy and he told him, "You're all right, Johnny." So, man, talk about nostalgia. Talk about a throwback. Talk about bringing everything together. And the series just ended so beautifully for everybody involved. You know, there was a sense of closure in this series. And again, I've watched my share of good television shows, and a lot of shows have a problem landing the ending. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you create such a masterpiece, and when it's time to actually end it, no matter what you do, you're not going to create a good ending. Some people are going to hate it no matter what. But with Cobra Kai, it was satisfying. And I'm in a place where I don't even need a sequel. I don't need them to release a movie 2-3 years from now or a spinoff. I mean, again, I'll watch whatever spinoff they release, but I don't need it. I'm comfortable. I can go back, start at season 1, watch all the way till the end of season 6, and I'm satisfied. It's a full story, and it leaves you feeling completed. It leaves you feeling satisfied, and that's the most important thing. Daniel got his happy ending. Sam went off to college in Okinawa, and Miguel joined her. You're going to assume that they're going to be together eventually. Tori finally got her big break. She's going to be doing the whole, influencer thing with Robbie. They're going to be traveling the world and cutting commercials and whatnot. So they're doing that. And everyone else is essentially happy and gets the ending that was fitting for them. Hawk and Dimitri end up going to the same college. Binary Brothers, going back to season 1, season 2 references. So overall, it was a very happy ending for almost everybody. Obviously, Kreese is dead, as is Terry Silver, so not everybody got their happy ending. Chosen got his happy ending. He ended up going to Korea and meeting up with that sensei lady. I'm forgetting her name. But overall, it's a very satisfying way to conclude the series. And again, to me, it's about not giving up, because no matter how much crap was flung at Johnny throughout the entire series, he kept pushing, and he screwed up along the way. It's not like he got this motivation and then suddenly everything worked out okay. You're going to have a lot of missteps in life. Life is going to throw a lot of crap your way, but no matter what, you can't give up. You can't bring yourself down. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep your eyes on the prize, and you got to stay strong, both physically and mentally. But mentally is the most important thing. I'm going to go back to season 1 real quick and talk about a line that I mentioned earlier, and that is flip the script. When Hawk came in as Eli Moskowitz, and he had the, defect on his lip, and he was like this nerdy, shy, introverted kid, Johnny told him, "Listen, you got to flip the script. Come back and get a scar or something. Do something drastic where people are not going to focus on your weakness. They're going to focus on what sets you apart." And that is a lesson that I applied to my personal life. I flipped the script. I used to be a stoner. I used to sit home and do nothing with my life, but I flipped the script. I stopped eating the junk food. I stopped smoking pot regularly, and I took my life in my hands, and I said that if I don't help myself, nobody else will. So in conclusion, this is a series that you can take a lot of lessons from and apply it to your life, a lot of motivation, and you can really do a lot with this. So yes, it's a fictional series. Yes, it's over the top. Yes, it's exaggerated. It's cheesy at times, but besides the fact that it's a fun, kick-ass series that you can come back to time and time again, you can actually take these lessons and really use them to better yourself as a person. Now, I know that I rambled for a long time. I know this was I went completely off path. I didn't stick to any particular order here, but again, I'm not a film critic. I'm not a film and television reviewer. I'm a pre-workout enthusiast and a supplement reviewer. So I thought I would do something interesting. I really enjoyed that series. It's been a couple of days since I finished it, and it stuck with me, which means it's something that was worth watching. And being invested in this for the past 7 years, I can definitely say that it had an impact on my life. So thank you to the writers of Cobra Kai, to the cast for making an incredible series. And you best believe I'm going to be doing a rewatch really, really soon. If you guys enjoyed this all over the place video, give me a like, comment below. Tell me what was your favorite part of Cobra Kai? What was your favorite season? Are you a fan of the original movies? Are you a new fan? Did you start watching during the YouTube Red era, or did you find it during the Netflix era? I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Let me know what you think. Once again, if you're new to the channel, if you're interested in pre-workouts, fitness supplements, any of that stuff, then subscribe to the channel because I got fire content dropping regularly, dropping the reviews for the hottest products of 2025 and for many, many years to come. I will see you all next time for the next High Stim pre-workout review. Take care, everybody, and have an amazing week up ahead. High Stim Ace, signing off.